I've played tons of NES games, and while I haven't played as many as I would like, I can comfortably say that I understand exactly what the system is capable of and what I expect from it. Now, we are all familiar with the term Nintendo Hard, and yeah, there are tons of difficult games out there for the system, and that's what I'm going to cover today, my top 10 hardest games on the NES. Now, before we get into this, I do want to say difficulty is a very subjective thing. We all have different skill sets in how we approach certain games, i.e., you might be good at Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but for the average person, like me, it might be difficult. So take this list with a grain of salt and enjoy the ride. Let's begin. You probably didn't expect to see this game on this list, did you? Maybe you expected to see Contra or Super C. Well, no. We're starting off with the Miracle Piano Teaching System. I personally wanted to put this on this list because you're doing more than just playing an NES game. You're learning how to play the piano, and yes, it's a real piano. I've actually considered buying it, but it costs a lot to ship. The Miracle Piano Teaching System is relatively straightforward. It teaches you how to play the piano over the course of like 36 lessons with varying difficulty. And even as someone who dabbles in playing piano, like I do, this is a difficult-ass game. But if there was an efficient way to learn how to play the piano on something that you already enjoy, then this is it. Now, you might have heard about this game from the AVGN, but I do want to go above and beyond and say that it was also released for the Amiga, Mac, Super Nintendo, and the Genesis. This game has one good thing going for it. 20 virgins were sacrificed to the God King Tim Fallon, who made one of the greatest soundtracks on the system. From the get-go, that's what we experienced, the true skills of Tim Fallon as a composer. Then we start the game, and that's where the nails get driven into our brains. The issue I have with Silver Surfer is that I don't know what portion of the map is safe to move to, and when you've played as many vertical and horizontal shooters as I have, that does matter. The entire difficulty of the game is more than just those areas, though. There's an astronomical amount of projectiles that give you little to no wiggle room. But there's only one way to beat a game that's being a bitch. Be a bigger bitch. That's why I own 5 different varieties of turbo controllers. With a turbo controller, this isn't nearly as bad. Sure, it's frustrating, but at least it's manageable. Arkanoid is a fun game. It's also tremendously difficult, and I tie that to the speed of the ball versus the motion of the paddle. Now, I've only ever checked this out with the NES controller, but there is a dedicated Arkanoid accessory that sort of replicates the feel of the arcade, that little knob that you would turn. Now, I'm not going to assume it's better to use it. You would know more than me, so feel free to comment down below and let everybody know how the controller feels should you have used it, growing up. Now, the game itself is truly a challenge, and compared to some of the other games on this list, that challenge is fun. I appreciate Arkanoid for what it is. It was a huge part of my childhood. It's funny to think about how hypnotic these kind of games can be from a psychological standpoint. They aren't particularly outstanding as video games, but damn, man, they capture our attention. Maybe it's the Tetris effect, who knows. This game is great, though. Difficult, but great. When I started my gaming journey on Twitch, Ghosts and Goblins was a game that I dreaded playing, and I did play it, and it was a leisurely experience and a wonderful game that wasn't too difficult. In fact, I can comfortably say I was happy and calm the entire time.
It's a very poorly designed port. It's a textbook definition of a port gone wrong. But I'm going to stay calm about it. I'm not going to get upset. I'm going to... Motherfucker! God!
I thought I was going to have hypertension by the time it was all said and done. Ghosts and Goblins is a relatively faithful port of the arcade title, but it is a little bit more forgiving in the continue aspect. Arthur still moves incredibly slow, we still need to beat it twice, the enemies are bullshit, and even though it took me a little while to beat it, despite the difficulty, I did have a good time with it. The most recent entry in the series was Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection, which I haven't checked out because I have a long way to go before I get there, but from what I've heard, it isn't bad. Ghostbusters is hard because it was designed poorly. No more, no less. It's 100% a jank licensed title that David Crane shit out on the Commodore 64, David Crane being one of the original founders of Activision. When it came time to port it to the NES, BitLabs made an atrocious entry that left a lot of consumers with a bad taste in their mouth. And what's insane is that almost every company that tried to replicate the original game for the purpose of porting it goofed it up in some way. The NES obviously has the stairway to heaven, right? Grab a turbo controller, problem solved. But the Sega Master System has shooting gallery sequences. David Crane had no creative input for any of these ports, and I feel that maybe if he did, it would have gone a little bit better. But at the end of the day, Ghostbusters on the NES is a very difficult game, and again, it's tied to just a shitty design. This game is a cult classic, and I have friends who hate it, and I have friends who adore it. To me, it boils down to sitting down and truly understanding how to play it. If you run around with zero context as what to do, just killing any zombie and trying to fight Jason with just your straightforward weapon that you get at the start of the game, yeah, you're gonna get turned into dust. But if you read the manual or even a guide, the game is fairly straightforward. And the most frustrating aspect of it is the map. It's really confusing and it's very misleading. In my opinion, it's just a clunky game that is dull as dull can be, but if you like it, bully for you. I'm happy. I hope to hear about it someday. Do you remember a while back when I talked about Deja Vu? Shadowgate was made by the same people, ICOM Simulations. It's part of the whole Mac Venture line of games, named so because they originated on the Macintosh computer. Shadowgate is pretty straightforward. It's a point-and-click adventure where we solve puzzles and we work our way into Castle Shadowgate. We avoid so many traps and then go straight into the gates of hell to assemble the Staff of Ages, then we find the Warlock Lord and we bring him to an end. It's an interesting game, but in terms of playability and difficulty, I found it much more difficult than Deja Vu. It also got significantly more love than Deja Vu did in the sequel department. Deja Vu only had one sequel, Deja Vu 2 Lost in Las Vegas, while Shadowgate had 5 more games, the most recent being Shadowgate VR, The Mines of Mythrock. It actually looks pretty good, but Steam does have some mixed reviews. To the Earth is an NES Zapper game, and it is considered by many to be the most difficult NES Zapper game out there. You can chalk it up to incredibly small targets that move incredibly fast. We actually briefly covered it in the NES Zapper episode, and I actually look forward to checking it out at some point because it looks good for what it is. Who knows, maybe I can beat it. Athena! If you played this, you might be like, oh shit, lady in bikini doing amazing things. But if you're me, you're shouting,
for fuck's sake, make the enemy stop, God! Fuck, I just want to walk!
Athena has a bad rep on the NES, and it kinda deserves it. SNK could have easily developed this, but they wrote it off to Micronix, who is notorious for making horribly depraved versions of games that they're based on, like 1942, which I do happen to enjoy, but to pretend it's anything like the arcade game, not so much. Athena itself did originate in the arcades, and if you've played the arcade version, it's not bad. Sure, there's a lot of enemies, but not nearly to the capacity of the NES version. In the NES version, you can take like 2 steps forward before you're gangbanged by enemies in every comprehensible direction. Athena is literal torture. If you can avoid playing it, I suggest it. Athena still sort of thrives to this day, but it's being relegated to mobile platforms. The true sequel, if you want to consider it, is a game called Psycho Soldier, and another subpar sequel called Athena Awakening from the Ordinary Life. Feel free to check them out if you want. A few episodes ago, I spent the time to play all of the licensed movie games on the NES, and this one in particular somehow ended up being worse than the previous game, which, if you've ever played it, is bad, but part 2 and 3 is a chore. a labor of love, and that love comes from a gaslighting ex-wife named Charity. You know what I'm saying? It's a game of memorization and dealing with some of the worst jump arches I've ever seen programmed in a video game, and because of that, should you make the choice to try to beat it, you're not going to have a good time. Trust me. Run and gun games are fun. Who doesn't want you to run to the top or to the right while blasting the shit out of bad guys? SNK. SNK doesn't want you to do that. In fact, SNK wants you to bend over and let Mirko Krokop sling a fully charged heel kick right to your taint. SNK was always like this. The running joke I have on my channel is that SNK means Shin Nihon Kikaku, which roughly translates to fuck you, give us your money. Because that's how it felt. SNK had some of the hardest coin-eater arcade games that you could imagine, and Ikari Warriors is a fine example of that energy transferred to an NES cartridge. The game is slow, annoying, and difficult to manage, but believe it or not, my kids love it. I think I even have a video of my 6-year-old daughter failing miserably at it, but at the end of the day, she's having fun, and that's all that matters. Now, if you want a polar opposite of Ikari Warriors, but you still want to satisfy that itch for the genre, check out Guerrilla War. It's another SNK game, but this time, no taint kicks. I don't know whether to say if this game is difficult or if it's just a heap of shit. I lean more so towards the latter definition because I 100% abhor this game. It's one big massive maze where everywhere you need to go is directly tied to memorization, which for some people might be fun, but for me, it sucks the fun directly out of the game. I tried to play this on 2 occasions, and both times I was baffled at just how bad this game was designed. It's a genuinely tedious game that just fucks you out of your time and patience. Now, I have friends that adore this game. Some say that it was a massive part of their childhood, which, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. But if I'm going to deal with so many difficult, shitty, trivial elements, I might as well play Milon's Secret Castle. If we were to put all 3 of the NES-era Ninja Gaidens on the table and choose one that was the most difficult, I would personally choose Ninja Gaiden 3 because Japan went out of their way to screw over the American audiences. Some of the mechanics that were in the Japanese version, namely the clone ability and numerous ninpo techniques, were just ripped out of the game, and what we should have been able to do offensively, and in some cases defensively, weren't there. The enemies in 3 are incredibly aggressive. The difficulty was cranked up on purpose, and in any way Technos could have screwed us over, they did. And guess what? We ate it up. Ninja Gaiden to me might be incredibly overrated as a franchise, but if you're looking for a solid, difficult, pain-in-the-ass time and that's what you like, then look no further than Ninja Gaiden 3. It's the cherry on top of a legacy franchise for the NES. I'm not that great at pool. I prefer darts. But if you ever want to feel really not good at pool, then play Championship Pool on literally any platform that it was released on. To me, it's like having your own personal pool shark sitting on your shelf ready to kick your ass. Now, the difficulty of this to me is that the AI almost never misses, so you really need to understand the physics of the game, which, luckily for you, are absolute trash. What should be a direct shot will oftentimes turn out wonky, but that's just the nature of the beast. That's how the programming is. The physics are just a granular aspect of what makes this so hard, but it does come into play. It's ultimately the AI that will ruin your day. The Immortal is an example of a game that is just mean. It's a mean bully of a game. It's an isometric action-adventure game that involves Mortimer, a wizard, calling for help. And we play as this old dude who picks up the message and goes, "Hello?" and then goes into the labyrinth to rescue him. And from that point on, you'll experience what many consider one of the most cut-and-paste bullshit experiences of your life, all the while dealing with a game that many would also consider fairly decent. The Immortal has it all. Fast enemies that catch you off guard, invisible hazards to power fist any open orifice, items that you have no clue if they'll help you or kill you, unintuitive puzzles that genuinely make no sense. All in all, I chalk it up to unforgiving level design, a lack of any semblance of guidance, and a combat system that is much to be desired. I love bullet hell shooters. As an archetype for the shoot 'em up genre, these really tickle my nutsack. I love them! Star Force on the NES, in my opinion, is the closest thing to a bullet hell that you can get on the platform. Contrary to games like this, Xanac, where the enemies themselves are more of a risk than projectiles, Star Force will lob a metric fuckton of bullets your way, and the enemies are blazing fast. And the company that made this, Tekken, they rock. They managed to do God's work in balancing the amount of sprites on screen, which if you've messed around with NES-era games before, is one of the critical flaws of the console itself. By the way, have you ever heard of Tekken? I'm sure you have, because they rebranded into a company that a lot of us love. Tecmo. Battletoads is hard for the wrong reasons, and that is trade winds are absolute assholes who enjoy BDSM, big donkey shit subpar mechanics. And while the beat 'em up sections are tolerable and the artwork is actually fairly decent, the other parts like the turbo tunnel, the snake maze, the rat race, the wheel chase, they're all abhorrent mistakes of mankind that will test your mettle and your resistance to taking a hammer to the fucking cartridge. Like I said, overall art design, really good. In my opinion, this is one of the best looking games on the system. And if the devs wouldn't have mixed their Xanny bars for meth, I think this would have been a good time for me. But my opinion on the game doesn't matter. This is hands down one of the most difficult games on the platform, and to beat it is something that you can be proud of. Nobody will care but you, but at least you're happy. And those are my top 10 difficult NES games. What do you think about this list? Are there any games that absolutely wrinkled your dingle as a kid or even as an adult? Feel free to comment down below. I truly hope that this video made you feel at home as a gaming enthusiast, and if you did make it this far, then please consider subscribing. You're already home in our community, a community of people who just really enjoy learning about games and remembering a time when life was a little bit easier to live. I'd love to have you here. Also, if you don't mind hitting that thumbs up button, it would help the channel get visibility so that I can share my retro gaming experiences with the world. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes. Fortifier out.